All right, gorgeous, sexy listener, huddle up if you have any interest at all in building a lean, muscular physique, because we are about to talk to an unquestionable expert, professional and multi-award winning bodybuilder Nimai Delgado. And if that name is ringing a bit of a bell, it's because you might have seen him in the popular Netflix documentaries, The Game Changers and You Are What You Eat. Because not only is Nimai on the cover of Muscle and Fitness magazine, he also built all that muscle on a vegan diet. Yes, I'm going to ask him about getting enough protein and all that plant-based athletic nutrition stuff that you're probably curious about. But what I love learning most from Nimai is his mindset. In this episode, he tells us about his unusual upbringing and what gave him the confidence to try and win bodybuilding competitions as a vegan when no one had ever done that before. He talks about how he built a massive following and how he deals with haters. And if you love woo-woo manifestation stuff, there are some goodies in here for you as well. If you currently have a stereotype about meathead bodybuilders, you are about to have that freaking crushed. I am so excited to introduce you to Nimai.
Breaking news. Your dream life isn't going to happen because you made a vision board. You're going to need goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. This podcast is about getting clarity on what you want, having the grit to do the actual work, and most importantly, constantly training your brain to be your bitch. Ready to be inspired? Here is your host, best-selling author, Una Duncan.
Okay, Nimai Delgado, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Una. I'm happy to be here. Excited.
So we're going to give people what they want right off the bat. And so I'm going to ask you, Nimai, you are vegan and you have built a massive amount of muscle. Where on earth do you get your protein?
Oh, I knew this was going to be the first question. I always answer this question by stating that most people don't understand how much protein they actually need. So I think whenever people ask this question, they assume that I consume an absorbent amount of protein per day. Let me just start off by saying that my target for protein on a daily basis is around 150 grams per day. And just to give you more context, I weigh like about 180 to 185 on a good day. And I get that easily through my tofu, my tempeh, lentils, protein powder, sprouts, oatmeal, everything else, pasta, bean pastas. I post a lot of my meals online just so people can see that you don't have to have a huge chunk of meat on your plate in order to have protein. Like I look at the totality of my plate and see that I'm getting 10 grams here, 10 grams here, 10 grams here, and, multiply that by 4 or 5 meals per day. And, you can hit that 150 target pretty easily. Most of the time I actually exceed it.
So it's not something you're worried about. It's not something you have to bend over backwards to make it happen.
I haven't tracked any kind of macros or calories in over 4 years, almost 5 now. And I've been able to easily sustain my physique and conditioning just because I built good habits. That's one thing I will say is that before that, I did track for religiously for almost 4 years because I was competing. So I was really meticulous about hitting my targets every single day. And within that, doing that for 4 years, built these kind of ingrained habits of okay, I know that I'm going to structure my meals like this. I know I'm going to include some higher protein plant source in there. I'm going to eat cleaner ingredients. I'm going to take my supplements. I'm going to have my, protein shake every day. And, that times years of training and consistency, you're going to get the results.
There you go. Yeah. And I know, you're a young man, but I know that you train women and you train people who are older and maybe facing menopause or muscle sarcopenia, the natural decline of muscle as we get older. Do you think these people need special diet considerations?
Absolutely. It is dependent on the individual. If you're just a sedentary individual, the USDA only recommends 40 to 60 grams of protein per day. Just to give you context, you can get 1 cup of cooked lentils has about 18 to 20 grams of protein. So if you just eat 3 cups of cooked lentils, you're covering your daily protein needs, which already has a buffer factor in it, a little bit of a contingency factor in there. But as you age, your body does change and you do need to account for muscle loss. So your protein intake does need to be a little bit higher. If you're older, or if you are an athlete or a bodybuilder and you're looking to put on muscle, your nutritional demands are going to be a little bit higher. And for athletes and bodybuilders, normally the formula that I like to go off of is about 0.82 grams per pound of lean body mass as your target. So, that tends to be more than enough. And anything beyond that, unless you're running, anabolics, then your body's not necessarily going to convert that into more muscle. So you can just reallocate some of those calories that would have been spent on protein and reallocate them towards more carbohydrates, for fuel, or more healthy fats as well.
There's a couple of things there that I think are interesting. So I think that the recommended daily allowance for protein by the World Health Organization, for example, is 0.8 grams per kilogram. And you're saying, well, let's do it 0.8 grams per pound to give us a little bit of extra. But then you specify per lean pound. So if someone is, for example, 200 pounds, but I don't know, 50% of that is adipose tissue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you would say go by 100 pounds?
I would say that you could use your goal weight as your target. For example, if you're like, you just nailed it. If you're 200 pounds and you have 50% of that being body fat, you aren't trying to feed protein to body fat. Like, you're not trying to consume protein so that you fuel body fat. You're consuming protein to fuel the muscle tissue that you have. So right away, these kind of like blanket recommendations that say, you need most of the literature that you'll find on like websites or fitness influencers online, they'll tell you anywhere from like 1 to 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I remember whenever I started doing more research, this was back in 2013 when I was like getting really into training and understanding how nutrition was playing a role into my ability to put on muscle and recover. I went to, the website bodybuilding.com. That was like the one resource that like I knew of that was going to tell me what to do. And almost every article was telling me I needed to eat at least a minimum of 1 gram per pound of body weight, and didn't say anything about, your body composition within that. So, you can be more efficient with your protein consumption and optimize it, because ultimately like I said, you're not trying to fuel the body fat, because that's extra energy that's already stored. You're not trying to, you're trying to fuel your muscle tissue. So that's why I like to go off of lean mass. Right
now, you're not the only vegan bodybuilder, but you might be the only one who has never eaten meat in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing?
Yeah, totally. I know this is very strange and unique and unheard of that there's mainly just somebody who hasn't eaten meat before, at least in this side of the world, but in other parts of the world, it's actually very common. So, both of my parents are originally from South America, from Buenos Aires, and in their early 20s, they actually discovered a group called the Hare Krishnas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's basically a sect of Hinduism that was getting westernized at that time. And they really resonated with the teachings from that group. And so much so that they decided to basically renounce their old way of life and devote themselves to their spiritual practice. And they moved into a temple. And then their guru told them about an opportunity to come to the United States to live in a farm community. And this farm community, it's funny because I always have friends that are like, oh, I just want to go live off the grid in a community with all my friends, and we'll have it'll be like fully sustainable. Like, that is a community that I grew up in, except it was a spiritual community, and we had our own organic farming. We had a cow sanctuary, it was a rescue cow sanctuary. And there was a temple, and it just provided a place for people to live their best spiritual life. So that's where I was raised. And within those teachings, that my parents followed, there was, one of the core concepts or core values is called Ahimsa. And Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word that roughly translates to compassion and nonviolence. So this is why most Buddhists and Hindus actually are vegetarian, because they understand that in order for an animal to end up on your plate, there had to be an act of violence that has taken place, whether they were the one to commit that act or not, whether you pay somebody else to do it or you consume that flesh, you're perpetuating that cycle of suffering and violence. So as a way to reduce your karma, because Hindus also believe in reincarnation, and this is just one lifetime of many on our soul's journey, in order to reduce or maybe position your spiritual journey in a better position for the next lifetime, you try to reduce as much karmic impact on this lifetime. So this is why they don't eat meat. And this is kind of a concept that was taught to me when I was really young. And it just stuck with me. Like, it made sense to me when I was a kid, and it makes sense to me growing up as an adult. So I never really had the desire to try meat in the first place. And I was doing just fine without it. So yeah, that's why I never had it.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking of so my kids have never eaten meat either, and they saw a picture once of a traditional like family having a turkey dinner at Thanksgiving, and my little son was like 3 at the time said, "What's that?" It's look at the birthday cake, and I said, "Oh no, it's not a birthday cake. It's a turkey." And he said, "A turkey?" And he said, "Like the bird?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a turkey." And they eat it, and he went, "No." This is true. If you grow up like that, it seems unthinkable. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a reason why we bring kids to like petting zoos and not to slaughterhouses, right? It's like kids understand that concept pretty easily, that kids are pretty compassionate and they don't want to cause harm or suffering to animals. And then as adults, we kind of condition them and teach them that this is just the way it is. And it just becomes so normalized to where, growing up, you don't really think about that. You kind of tend to have this cognitive dissonance around the food that you're consuming, because, we will preferably treat dogs and cats and some particular animals a certain way, and then other ones completely different, and just see them as commodities. So it's interesting, but I think that times are changing, and I think that people are becoming more conscious of where their food comes from, and trying to make more conscious, healthy decisions. So I have hope that we're moving in the right direction.
So, Nimai, listening to you talk, it sounds like you're pretty aligned with the way you grew up. You didn't have a big teen rebellion where you wanted to say, forget all this Hare Krishna stuff.
Yeah, I did. You know what? I had an aversion to it growing up, just because I feel like the environment that I was raised in. I grew up in South Mississippi, which I know you live in Canada. I mean, Mississippi, for those that don't know, is one of the southern states in the United States. And just for context, it was the capital for the Confederate Army in the Civil War. And it was also the last state to abolish slavery. It's also the state with the least amount of educational funding, and the state with the highest amount of obesity and cardiovascular disease. So, needless to say, like, our community of Hare Krishnas, our spiritual community of vegetarians that were following a more Hindu philosophy, we stood out like a sore thumb. And the surrounding community was more Southern Baptist, Christian, Catholic. And, they let us know that we were different. We felt very unwelcome. I can remember waking up to burning crosses outside of our community.
Oh my gosh.
For those that don't know, it's like a warning signal from the KKK, basically saying, like, get the heck out of here. You're not welcome here. So naturally that made me really apprehensive to really own that part of my heritage or really be forthcoming with it. So I became more and more reserved about sharing my beliefs, where I come from, why I was vegetarian, just because I just wanted to fit in with my peers, be accepted. So there was a time in the middle of my life, I would say middle school, high school, I never really talked about it. And when people would ask me about why I was vegetarian, I just said I just didn't like meat. But I would never really get into the more philosophical beliefs, just because I was tired of being questioned. Everybody would start asking me questions, and I would feel like I'd have to defend myself or my beliefs. And as a young person that's trying to find out who they are, that can be really challenging to be questioned all the time. So I wouldn't say that I had a rebellious period, but I definitely had a period where I kind of disowned that part of myself. And it wasn't until I had left the South. I went to Louisiana for college, and then I moved to California. And that's where I felt like this kind of freedom to be myself, because I was in an environment that was brand new. So I was like, oh, I get to be whoever I want to be. I was like, what would it feel like to just own my background and who I am? And I started meeting other vegetarians. I felt like I was the only vegetarian in Mississippi for sure. But when I moved to California, I met more and more people that allowed me like kind of more permission to be who I was or who I felt like was my authentic self. And that's when I really started to even share online about my journey of being vegan and everything. So yeah, not a rebellious, but more of an aversion.
What's interesting to me is you got to California and you didn't like find your fellow hippies and instead you went to bodybuilding. Again,
yeah.
You're going to be kind of a weirdo.
Yeah. Well, I would say bodybuilding found me. I was always into fitness. Like, I think I started training the first time I stepped foot in the gym, I was like 16 or 17. And I was a small kid. I was, whether it was because I was vegetarian or just a late bloomer, I was always the shortest kid in my class. And even when I graduated high school, I think I was still like one of the shortest kids in my class. And I didn't have a growth spurt until after I graduated. But I would still go to the gym. And by the time I moved to California, I had been training for a couple of years in college. And that's when I was really starting to get into it. Like my last year of college, I actually made friends with a group of personal trainers. And up until that point, I had just kind of been training recreationally, kind of meandering around the gym and doing curls and, just like the show muscles, like curls and abs and bench, and then I made friends with a group of trainers and they started to really teach me how to train more intentionally and program and follow a schedule. And that was right before I moved to Bakersfield in California. And in Bakersfield, it's a pretty unique place. It's like, there's not much to do. There's a lot of farming, a lot of agriculture, big oil town. So it felt very much like Mississippi in the sense that there was like not much to do. It felt very country. And I just found myself going to the gym. And the thing about Bakersfield is they already had a pretty uniquely established bodybuilding scene. Like there was a lot of competitors that were already in the bodybuilding scene by like, they would go to contests, and there was a couple of pros in Bakersfield, and I would see them at the gym. And there was kind of this like excitement around bodybuilding. And the more that I trained, the more I made friends with those bodybuilders. And then again, somebody was just like, I got to a certain point in my training and somebody was like, you should compete one day. And I was like, ha, yeah, right. Like I'm an engineer, I was like all, like attached to the idea of like being a professional. And that's like not something I would do, like go step on stage and flex in front of people, half naked. And then, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to try it. I was like, I don't really have anything else going on outside of work. This is exciting. I like it. I'm just going to give it a go and see if I like it. And then I did my first show and then, ended up winning the first show I did. So naturally, when you win at something, you want to do more, like it's fun, so I did the first one. And then, by that point I had already made the switch to being vegan. So people were really surprised whenever they found out that I was like, I had won a bodybuilding show and that I was vegan. And that's when I really realized that people are like deserve to know that you could like, achieve this level of physique and success, like through this alternative route and still have the same results.
I think, tell me if I'm wrong, that you would be vegan for ethical reasons, even if it didn't mean that you were going to, even if it meant that you weren't going to be the muscliest dude in the world. But I think you also think that it's actually helped you. Is that true? Do you think that actually eating plant-based is actually going to make you healthier and stronger?
Absolutely.
Is that a detriment?
I feel like, when I made the decision to go fully vegan, like I was always an ethical vegetarian for spiritual reasons. But whenever I made the decision to go fully plant-based was because it was an ethical choice. Cause I'd seen a video that kind of showed what happens in a dairy farm. And it really moved me because I had always kind of justified eating cheese and drinking milk or whey protein and all the rest of the dairy products by saying that like, well, these cows aren't being killed, they're just being milked. But I had no idea the nature of the dairy industry and what actually happens to dairy cows. And all dairy cows end up in slaughterhouses and they're treated, with no regard of their well-being in the whole process. So once I saw the videos, I was like, I don't want to contribute to this. Like I saw it and I immediately felt shitty about, paying somebody paying somebody else to commit this act of violence towards these living creatures. And then I was consuming the byproduct of that. And I just like, I don't want to consume that energy. I don't want to contribute to that industry. So I'm just going to make a stance against it by just not contributing to it anymore, not consuming it. I had no idea about the benefits that I was going to receive by eliminating dairy. Because at that time I was vegetarian, and as a vegetarian, kind of relied a lot on dairy as far as like whey protein as a protein source, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. I would always go order the bean burritos, the bean and cheese burritos, the cheese pizza when I was eating out, because that was always like the vegetarian option. So I knew that it was going to be inconvenient for me to give up, those products that I relied on so much, but I just felt like it was, in alignment. Like I just wanted to live in alignment with that feeling, right? Or that value. And then as it turned out, like after I started doing more research, because I was like, okay, what am I going to do to get protein? Like, is this going to affect my ability to train, or am I going to become unhealthy? Like, I didn't know. I was still very early on in my nutritional, understanding. And to my surprise, I found out that like 65% of the world's population is intolerant to dairy, including, Hispanics like me. So I thought that like my digestive discomfort, my gas, my bubble guts that I would have every single time that I would drink a whey protein shake, I thought it was just normal. But it turns out it wasn't normal. So as soon as I eliminated dairy, I noticed my recovery improving. I noticed my skin clearing up. I noticed I was sleeping better. Like my allergies were less, and I just felt like just 10 times better. Because I was less inflamed because I was having less of a reaction to it. So once that happened, I started seeing improvements in the gym. My PR started going up. My physique started to improve. And that was when the decision, I kind of started to entertain the idea of bodybuilding. So then once I started bodybuilding, I started talking with other bodybuilders, and I swear I think that being plant-based is like a secret weapon, because it allows you to eat an abundance of nutritional foods that have micronutrients, that have fiber, that not only allow you to look a certain way, but they allow you to feel great in the process. You talk to most bodybuilders that are like backstage, like they look great, but internally they're like rotting, a lot of them, or maybe not rotting, but like they don't feel as great as they look,
Yeah.
So at least the majority of them. So I think that being plant-based is like, it can be a secret weapon. And I wish that more bodybuilders would explore it, because they're so willing to take whatever chemical or anabolic they can get their hands on to improve their physique, but they're unwilling to look at just eating a plant-based diet that can not only improve their physique, but also improve their health and their longevity as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think a lot of people, if they hear of a vegan athlete, they're like, well, I guess you can kind of make that work, but it's going to be really hard. And, it's not the optimal choice, but you're saying, no, it is the optimal choice, actually.
Yeah. I think now there's more and more evidence to support the idea of just incorporating more plants as a way of improving performance and recovery for athletics at the highest level. So you think about like Olympic athletes and how strict and regimented and how like willing they are to explore the latest technology, and like how they can just have a 10th of a second improvement on whatever sport they're doing. So I think that more and more people are getting curious about it and really understanding the power of plants and how that can really optimize your health, your sleep, your performance, your ability to recover, all of it. So I wish that more athletes would endorse it. And I feel like they are, and now there's becoming more and more representation of people in sport that are, being advocates for a plant-based lifestyle. And I think it's important too, because most young people look up to athletes as being their role model. And I can remember growing up being a vegetarian and feeling like there was nobody that I could look up to and be like, wow, that guy's like a pro soccer player, or like, he's the quarterback of this team and he's vegetarian. Like he's like me and he's like performing at the highest level. So I think that just for future generations, it's going to be so important for them to have somebody to look up to that is living this way. And that way they can like aspire to do the same thing and know that it's possible even at the highest level.
I was going to ask you that, because now you're kind of the name that people say when people are like, oh, you can't build muscle without, animal protein. People are like, well, look at that guy. And that's you. But I was wondering, when you were growing up, you didn't have a you to say, oh, look, it's possible. So what made you believe that it was possible?
I guess just my experience. I had grown up and people had always challenged me. They had always told me that I needed to eat meat, or that I was going to become unhealthy or that I wouldn't be able to be an athlete. And I was always athletic growing up, like always. I was always playing soccer, football. I was always into extreme sports. So like rollerblading, skateboarding, wakeboarding, snowboarding, all of it. So I was always really good at everything that I did. And so when people would tell me about myself, it would always kind of piss me off. Like I had a chip on my shoulder and I was like, actually watch me. Like that was always my attitude when people would tell me I couldn't do something. And there was the same thing whenever I started, getting more and more into bodybuilding. I would always hear from people, they're like, oh, you're vegetarian. Like, yeah, you'll never be able to get like super muscular. And I'm like, dude, I'm as big as you are, and then when I went
That's
vegan,
so annoying.
I know. When I went vegan, when I decided to compete, one of the things I did was I started reaching out to coaches because I was like, I don't know how the hell to prepare for a bodybuilding show. Like I know how to like train, but I don't know how to like what to do or how to eat or how to pose or any of that. So I started reaching out to these different bodybuilding coaches that I had, gotten contacts from other competitors in Bakersfield or like that knew of, popular bodybuilding coaches in California. And I remember emailing a couple of them and trying to get a hold of them and asking them if they were, down to work with me, but I was vegan, and every single one of them rejected me. They were just like, I'm not going to work with you because one, you have to eat meat. And if you don't eat meat, you're not going to be a successful bodybuilder. And I don't want to coach you or waste your time because it's not possible. And I'm like over here, I was like, I haven't even sent you a photo of myself yet. So you don't even know what I look like. And I was like, whatever. So I ended up finally finding a coach that was local. And he, again, didn't know shit about plant-based nutrition. I was like, look, I don't need you to tell me what to eat. I'll figure it out. Just tell me macros. Like at least just tell me macros. I'll figure out how to fit in the macros and I'll follow that, protocol and just see if it works leading up to the show. And it worked. We ended up winning the first show, and then I did another show right after that. 4 weeks later, I won that show. I did another show like 2 months later. I won that show. And, I'm beating guys that are all, the first show I did was in the natural league and I swept the entire show. The second show I moved over to the untested league because after I won the show in the natural league, people were talking shit to me, telling me, yeah, but you only won because, you weren't competing against guys that are on gear. You would never stand a chance against guys in the NPC, which is like an untested league. And I was like,
what's untested? Nimai, I don't know these terms. Natural means without steroids?
So there's multiple bodybuilding federations and different leagues. So some leagues are tested and they do different forms of testing. So they'll do like a P test to make sure that you're not taking any kind of banned substance. And then other organizations, depending on the level, they can even do like polygraph tests, to like a lie detector test to make sure that you haven't taken any kind of anabolics or unapproved substances, right? So I won in the untested or the tested league. And then I was like, at that time, I didn't feel like there was much exposure in that league. And I wanted to compete against the people that were, the top of the class. Yeah, exactly. So I remember winning, and then guys were just like, yeah, but you won in the natural league. You won't be able to hold your own in the untested league, which is like the NPC and IFBB. Like the NPC is the amateur league that feeds into the IFBB, which is the professional. It's almost like college and then professional, right? So I was very confident in myself. I was like, I think I look great. I've seen the other guys that step on stage. I think I can hold my own at least. I think I could be competitive at least. And the first show I did in the NPC, I ended up winning the overall. And I was like, okay, so I just beat out 60 to 80 other guys as a natural vegan. And now I think I could keep going. Like if I had this level of success at this show, I think I could get to the pro league. And then when I won at the amateur level, people were like, yeah, but you'll never make it to the pro league because you have to get on gear and gear is like another like slang for steroids. They're like, you have to get on gear. All the guys in the pro league are on gear and you won't be able to compete or get as big as them being a vegan. I was like, I think I can. Like, watch me. Like, if anything, it fueled me more. And then within a year, I think, year and a half, it took me to become a pro. And I became the first vegan pro at that level.
And what a benefit to you that you have that impulse whenever someone says you can't do it. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, okay. And your response is, watch me. Which I can imagine that really has served you in your life.
I mean, I have maybe a delusional amount of self-belief at times. And I think it's definitely helped me in my career. But I really do believe in myself. Like everything that I've ever really given my effort to, I've been able to achieve or accomplish. And I think that like having that level of self-belief, it really drowns out the noise. Like when people would tell me what they think is possible for me, I would immediately say like, that might be impossible for you, but don't project that onto me. Like I know what I'm capable of and you might not be capable of that, and that's okay. But don't put your limiting beliefs onto me because I don't believe them. And that was something that really served me, especially in the bodybuilding scene, just because I would hear it over and over again. And I'm like hearing it from guys that have been competing for 5 years and they never made it to the pro level. And I'm like, that's on you, like that's your experience. That's your experience. And like, I'm a completely different human than you are. And I believe that I can. And, it happened to work out for me. And bodybuilding is it's a really interesting sport because it is subjective. So it pretty much like depends on who shows up that day. You have no control over who shows up at a bodybuilding show. You don't know. So you can't possibly prepare for who to compete against. And people say it's a competitive sport. You're in competition with yourself and that's it. Like you can't control what anybody else does. You can't control what they're eating, what they're taking, how they're preparing. All you can control is what you do and how you show up that day and what set of judges like you that day. And that's it. So I was blessed enough to show up on the right day and bring the right package and earn that pro status in 2016. And then I did, I think 10 other shows at the pro level, and I did pretty well. I placed top 5 in majority of the shows that I competed in. And for anybody that's competed at the pro level, like just to beat one other pro, because they all look great. Like everybody on stage is like top 0.1% physique. So It's an accomplishment in and of itself just to step on stage.
You told me once, people are always asking about my physique, but my physique is a result of the way I show up. And the way I show up is a result of the way I think. And the way I think is because of how I grew up. Can you tease that out for me a little bit more?
So I always like to talk about like your mindset is the foundation for everything. Like frequency precedes form, right? So think about like frequency precedes form. So what you think of it, like thought precedes reality. So your thoughts, like manifesting is whenever your thoughts turn into reality or turn into physical form. So what you think about most frequently, you'll tend to get. So I'm a big believer, this, we talk about the law of attraction all the time. So the more I started learning about the importance of mindset, the more my life started to transform. So understanding what you're thinking about and noticing kind of like the things that you're focusing on, it's such an important way because that's where it's such an important thing to be aware of, because that is where the true transformation lies. Because most people, you can have all the goals and desires that you want, but how come people don't have them? Like if it was a matter of just having desires, then everybody would be rich, everybody would be in shape, everybody would have everything that they want. There's some reason that you're not accomplishing, acquiring, or doing the things that you want. And for most people, they place these limitations on themselves, right? So they are their biggest obstacle. And as a coach, you can start to really uncover and understand where people's limiting beliefs tend to be. And most of the time, it's around their own self-image. And whether it's conscious or unconscious, we tend to kind of have this compository self-image of how we think and feel about ourselves. That's based off our life experience, our trauma. People have told us, or we've been rejected, we don't like the way we look, whatever. We don't think we're smart enough. We have imposter syndrome. All of these things can end up becoming a ceiling for what we are able to accomplish. So for me, I really like to kind of be mindful of how I speak about myself and how I think about myself, and always try to rewire and reframe my beliefs about myself to be in a positive light that are self-serving rather than self-limiting. So the way I show up for myself for my career, for my relationships. It's all a byproduct of how I feel about myself. So I love taking care of myself. You know, people say that being selfish is like a negative thing. I think that we as humans, we have to be selfish at times, because the best way I can show up and serve other people is when I feel good, when I'm in my highest self, like when I'm like fully aligned, I'm healthy, all of these things that allow me to show up for my business, my relationships, my clients. So yeah, it's definitely a symptom of how we think.
Do you have any practices that you would share? Because I feel like people might be listening to this and being like, yeah, I don't have that. I don't know how to get that. What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah. Okay. Here's a fun exercise. For a moment, just imagine your ideal life. Like if money were no option, like you don't have to worry about how you got there. Just like if you could close your eyes and imagine you living your highest timeline. Like what would you be doing? Who would you be doing it with? Where would you be doing it at? What would you look like? What would your physique look like? How would you be dressed? What car would you be driving? Like get as specific as possible. Write it all down. Then be mindful of the thoughts that immediately follow that. The buts. Yeah, but I'll never have that. Yeah, but I'm not smart enough. Yeah, but I don't have the privilege or the background or the wits or the intelligence. I'm too old. That is your work. Like that's where you start, right? That is the gap, and that is your assignment, that you get to close that gap and really know that you are capable. The fact that you have the desire for it means that you have the capability to achieve it, to do it, to have it, whatever that is. And the more that you convince yourself that you don't is the reason why you don't have it, you know? And it's only things like people are like, okay, well, yeah, I can say that I want $1 million, you know? And it's like, okay, you say you want it, but you're convinced that that's an impossibility for you. I can hear it in your voice. There's more doubt and disbelief in your voice when you say that than belief. So learning how to, like, if it's a 50-50, like, you know, like over here is complete self-doubt, over here is complete belief. If you can just learn to start landing on this side, always on like the positive self-belief, you'll start to see how much your world changes, and stop concerning yourself with the how. Just get really clear on what. Like, what is it that you want to accomplish or be or do or have? And just trust that it's going to happen, and just keep focusing on that. Concern yourself less with the how. The how is going to figure itself out if you get really clear on the what.
So if someone does this exercise and they come up with a yeah, but, and it's, for example, yeah, but they believe that in their soul, or yeah, but teachers don't become millionaires, or whatever it is. So what would be the next step to start to interrupt that belief, just to put a little bit of a seed of doubt of that absolute reality for them?
I mean, most people look at their history. They look at their history to find evidence to support the belief that they already have, right? So they're just like, yeah, well, I wanted this in the past and I got rejected. So that means that I'm going to keep getting rejected. And it ends up becoming this like self-fulfilling prophecy. But for example, the one that you just said, it's like, yeah, but teachers don't end up becoming millionaires. I know teachers that are millionaires, you know, like right away, that's negates that evidence, a piece of evidence. Like, learn to look for the evidence that supports that belief. You know, if you want it and you don't think that you're powerful, like instead of looking at all the reasons why you're not powerful, look at your life and all of the evidence that you have to support the belief that you are powerful and you are capable, you are disciplined, you are intelligent. Age doesn't matter. You know, there's plenty of people that have broken the age stereotype in many different industries. So again, we tend to sell ourselves on why it's not possible for us. Like, learn how to be a salesman or a saleswoman on all the reasons why it's inevitable for you to reach that goal, you know, and just remind yourself of that every single day. And you'll start to look around you because you're training yourself that it's already happened. It's an inevitability. So you start to look for the opportunities. You start to talk about it more. You start to attract the right circumstances, attract the right connections that can open up doors for you in ways that wouldn't be possible if you were already closed off because you're not looking for them. So right away, you start to look for the evidence to support the beliefs that you are going to accomplish whatever it is that you desire.
I love it. Thank you. So we talked about goals and we just talked about some woo woo shit, which I love. And I wanted to talk about grit because I was scoping out your Instagram in preparation for this interview. And you'll have a post, Nimai, that's like so simple, so neutral. You'll be like, here's what I look like and here's what I eat. And some of the comments are like just venomous. Like, give it a year and watch your face fall off because you haven't had any meat. Like, literally, watch your health deteriorate. You are misinformed. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon says we need meat. Or have you heard of this doctor who said this? Or I went vegan once and all my teeth fell out and blah, 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 blah. So, like, I have so many questions about this. One, why are all these people following you? And if they hate what you stand for so much. Two, why did they feel so threatened by your assertion that your life is working well for you? Three, like, are you so exhausted with defending this? Or just tell me a little bit about the grit, or maybe this doesn't require any grit from you at all.
No, it does. It does. I would say maybe resilience, right? Because I wasn't always so resilient. I used to, like I said, be very concerned with being well liked or fitting in or being accepted. And as my following started to grow, back in 2015, I remember the first comments that I would get, early on about being a vegan in the space, just talking. And I've always been very neutral in the sense of like, I don't come at people for living differently than me or choosing to eat meat. Like, all I do is try to share my experience and share what's working for me and show that there is this alternative way of living that has these benefits and can yield this result. And also, by the way, is supported by a ton of literature and a ton of science that shows it's also better for the planet, for your longevity, for the health, for the animals, all this, whatever. But I'm just talking about my experience. So here it is, right? And I remember the first comments that I would get from people that were talking shit about me. And I'm just like so taken back. I was like literally like so affected by it. And I was just thinking to myself, like, what did I do to you? Like, I haven't done anything to you. And yet you're personally attacking me for no reason. It would really bother me. And then I started to slowly just learn to accept that people are always going to have their opinions. And anytime you have an alternative way that's not the norm, that's not the socially accepted thing that everybody else does, you're going to receive criticism about it. And that's just the way it is. You could ask 10 people in a room the same question and you would get 9 reasonable answers. And that one person that's like, hey, screw you, but you multiply that by like 1,000 and now that one person becomes 100 people. You do that by 100,000, that one person is now 10,000 people. So it seems like there's a lot more people than there actually is. So as my following grew, I just learned how to just like not let that energy penetrate my screen and affect me, because if I allowed it to affect me, then I would just be constantly pushed around by other people's opinions and energies. So I had to learn pretty quickly to just accept that, I'm going to be disliked. People are going to disagree. People are going to have opinions, and that's okay. It doesn't make me right and them wrong. It just makes us have different perspectives. So the more that, like, as the years have gone on, the amount of hate and ignorance that I've received has gone up exponentially as well. And I just tend to like brush it off. I don't know. It's like, it just deflects off of me. I am human. Some days I'll get, like I'll feel the impulse to be like, you know what, dude, Bob 397 from Iowa, like, I'm going to tell you how I really feel. And then I remember that like everything I do has it's public, and I don't want to be putting out that energy. And if I really want to try to embody compassion, what's the most compassionate thing I can do is just let it be, and just, instead of spending my energy responding to somebody that is just there to hate and to criticize, there's another person that leaves a comment right underneath it that's asking for help. And I'm going to choose to spend my energy and attention on the people that actually are wanting to learn more about this lifestyle and are willing to have an open discussion about it, rather than spend my time trying to convince somebody of doing something that they don't care about, and they're not interested. So yeah, I would say that like having a social media that has like a size following that I do, it's kind of like a social experiment. It allowed you to kind of like understand humans on like a grand level. Cause I don't think we're meant to have this much exposure, like having thousands of people reach out to you and send you messages and receiving unsolicited opinions about how you should live your life. And it's really gifted me. It feels like liberating in a sense to not care what people think about how I live my life, because I'm at peace with it, and one thing that one of my mentors, Peter Crone, said one time to me, and he just talks about this on his platforms also. He says, words only hurt you to the degree to which you already believe them to be true. So when you get triggered by something that somebody says to you and you get like a little activated, there might be a part of you that somewhat believes it, right? So on some level, so that always stuck out to me. And I'm just like, okay, like somebody's calling me names, like I don't believe that to be true about myself. So it doesn't affect me, like how do I feel about myself and my life? And am I at peace with it? Yeah, I am. I'm not causing anybody any harm. I know the intentions of what I'm trying to do. I'm okay with being misunderstood.
And in a way, it's kind of like amazing mindset training, because it's forcing you to refocus on the 90% of people who are like, hey, Nimai, looking great. Thanks for sharing. Versus the 10% that are like, you're going to die. You suck. And it's like any kind of training, as you get bigger and stronger, the training gets harder. And that's exactly what you're experiencing it.
Exactly.
Final question for you, Nimai. In working with your clients, do you find that the people what do you find people need the most help with? Having a clear vision and a path for where they want to go, or having the grit, or as you said, resilience to actually execute the plan, or the woo-woo mindset stuff of getting their mindset right?
I would say mindset. I think that most people think it's the plan, but really it's the mindset, because we are drowning in information. Like you can go online and find what to do at any moment. Like you can go to YouTube, find a full program. You could go on Reddit, find meal plans. You can use ChatGPT and it'll produce an entire thing for you to follow. But I always say that you can have the perfect plan in front of you, but it doesn't mean shit if you don't follow it. Right. So like what's really preventing you from showing up and executing and taking action on this plan? Like you can know where you want to go. Like, yeah, I want to drop 20 pounds. Great. So does everybody else, what are you doing? And like, what are you not doing? So for most people, they kind of need some assistance to retrain the way that they show up. And I always like to start with like the mindset, because once you can correct the mindset, then showing up for things that are hard become way easier, because you don't resist them. You don't talk yourself out of them. You don't negotiate with yourself, because you understand the actual importance of what it is that you're trying to accomplish and the joy or the freedom that it's going to provide for you. And you can start to kind of have more discipline. And I feel like discipline is a muscle also. And meeting people where they are, we've been working together, but also with my other clients, I love to meet people where they are. I'm a very gentle coach, because I'm just like, my ultimate goal is not to be like a hard ass coach and tell you what to do. It's to help you. You already have all the answers. You already have the ability to self-resource your own motivation. And I want people to be their own inspiration. Like, it's okay if you're inspired by somebody else, in the short term, but I want people to look at my clients to look into the future using their mind's eye and envision themselves living the dream life, having the dream physique, doing all the things that they wish they could do. And I want that to be your own inspiration. I want them to imagine like your future self looking back at you, encouraging you to be like, yes, keep going. I'm so proud of you for not giving up, for showing up and doing the work, because I am living your dreams right now. So helping people close that gap and realize that they already have everything that they need to accomplish, to create whatever life that they want for themselves. It's just helping them find that path. And sometimes when you try to go too hard and some people respond to that. I like to meet people where they are and expand on that. You don't have to be training for 5 days a week for 2 hours a day. If you can only make it to the gym a couple minutes every day, that's great, and just like, how can you expand on creating good habits and exercising that discipline until that discipline muscle gets stronger and stronger, and then you can take on more and more. Mm-hmm. So yeah, mindsets, I think it's the most important place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I know that people are going to want to hear more from you, learn more from you, of course, see what you eat every day and how you get your protein. So how can people keep in touch with you and learn more from you?
Yeah, just find me on any platform, Nimai Delgado. I'm pretty easy to search just because there's not too many Nimais. Right. So I'm on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I haven't posted on Twitter in a while. I do have a podcast. I put that on pause, but I do have a ton of really great episodes on there with plant-based doctors and athletes, and we talk about all kind of different topics. So be sure to check that out too.
Well, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I appreciate it so much. I love our conversations.
Always, Una. Thank you for having me.
Well, what did you think about Nimai? He is honestly one of my favorite people to talk to about achieving goals. And he mentioned a tool in this interview that I just wanted to highlight in case you missed it, because I think it's so powerful. So he said, think of your dream, that thing that you want more than anything, and then notice the yeah, but that comes up. So you think, oh, I'd love to start a business. Yeah, but I'm too old. Yeah, but the market's too crowded. Yeah, but I don't know anything about technology. And all those yeah, buts are your bullshit. And he didn't say bullshit. I'm saying bullshit. As I define it in my book, Healthy as Fuck, your bullshit is the stories you're telling yourself that are keeping you stuck. And one of the best ways to break up with your bullshit is to find evidence that someone else has accomplished what you want to with your same obstacle. So for example, if you think, I can't possibly be sexy at 200 pounds, you can do some Googling and find some plus size models who are pretty fucking sexy at 200 pounds, for example. So one of the reasons that I admire Nimai so much is that he had zero precedent of someone who could win bodybuilding competitions on a vegan diet, and everyone saying that he absolutely could not do that. And his response was, watch me. So dude, here's what I want you to do right now. Think of that dream that you have. Notice the inevitable yeah, but that comes up right away. And then just for fun, answer it with watch me and just see what happens. I'll see you next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.